Dobry dien. Hello, my name is Luke Vandenhoek, and I'll be analysing three media sources and considering the effects of media framing in relation to the 25th November 2018 skirmish between Russian and Ukrainian border forces in the Sea of Azov. So, source one is a YouTube video, entitled Russia-Ukraine Standoff in Kerch Strait, from the independent journalism channel entitled Caspian Report, narrated by the editor Shivan Neftchi, who specialises in geopolitics and hails from Azerbaijan. The date of this clip is December 13th, 2019. Source 2 is a feature article from the New York Times entitled Russia Slowly Throttles Ukrainian Port. This is by Andrew Higgins. The article appeared in both print and web-based forms. Andrew is a British-American journalist. The date of this article is December 14th, 2019. Source 3 is a news article from BBC Ukrainian correspondent Zhana Bezpiatyuk entitled Russia-Ukraine Sea Clash Leaves Mariupol Port Deserted. The story appeared on both BBC Ukrainian and Kiev Post websites. The date of this article is December 16th, 2019. So on November 25th, 2018, Russian Border Force Guard intercepted and took possession of a Ukrainian Navy tug on two armoured ships attempting to cross into the Sea of Azov via the Kerch Strait. This was a scheduled redeployment. Russia stated that when the flotilla refused to comply with an order to halt, the Ukrainians violated Russian territorial waters that they claimed during the 2014 annexation of Crimea. The Russians have since effectively closed the Kerch Strait to Ukrainian vessels. Ukrainian President Poroshenko subsequently placed the Ukrainian border regions under martial law. So what is the political context of the stories of origin? So Azerbaijan maintains good relations with Europe and is a member of the Human Rights Council and NATO's Partnership for Peace program. While Democracy Index, not great, 2.65 out of 10, authoritarian regime, still at least a state outwardly promoting the value of a rules-based international order and good international citizenship. For the United States, promote liberty, equality, democracy as essential tenets of the American identity, yet frequently act unilaterally in the pursuit of self-interest and counter to the interests of the collective international good. And this is despite they were instrumental in establishing the foundations of our society as we know it. Ukraine, government corruption is rampant and domestic politics are considered widely fractious. Received an average democracy rating of 5.69 out of 10, while a freedom index of 101 indicates a bad position for the press. So this would probably encourage a bit more of an indexing approach in journalism. So how has the issue been framed? Caspian Report. Extensive counterframing provides a balanced presentation of both possible motives and intentions from the Ukrainian and Russian perspectives. Shivan uses pragmatic language, not emotive in any way, while utilising facts and empirical data to back up his claims. For example, he states, not to say Russia didn't contribute to tensions, however, Ukraine had greater reason to do so. Shivan could be perceived in this way as shifting the blame from squarely Russian shoulders, but he does believe that Russia is perceived to have more to lose through taking unnecessary military action. He does acknowledge that Russia acted wrongly, but states Ukraine has also acted to provoke. The New York Times, Andrew frames the issue from the perspective of, again, Russian aggression, likening it to the Strait of Hormuz and China's actions in the South China Sea as essentially rewriting the rules of the international order. So look no further than the article's web and print titles. Russia slowly throttles Ukrainian port and key Russian weapon against Ukraine is fear. So he does provide a counter-narrative to the dominant frame of Russian aggression when he cites Stefan Maxima, who's a Ukrainian politician, who describes Russia as our neighbour rather than our foe, and also attributes President Poroshenko to doing the same. So he refrains from blaming Moscow, rather stating that Ukraine must take all steps to put relations back in order, and acknowledges that Ukraine is often played into Russia's hands by engaging in wild exaggeration, which gives traction to Russian propaganda that depicts Ukraine as untrustworthy and hell-bent on war. So for BBC Ukrainian, Russia as the villain is contrasted with the emotive language used to describe the Ukrainian situation as one of victimization and powerlessness. Zhana encourages feelings of empathy towards Ukraine. So martial law is described as restrictions rather than actually an intensive military intervention, while utilizing words such as bleak, dead, starved, painful, desperate and sad to describe the situation in Ukraine. She also cites Captain Alexander Grigorievsky of the Ukrainian forces, who accuses Russia of strangling this port. Also consider the focus on the detention of Ukrainian crew, not soldiers, even though they were on a military vessel. So how might source contribute to the generation of opinions? Well, for the Caspian Report, it is an independent production which could lead to questions of unmitigated personal bias. Shivan, however, does provide a video for the explicit purpose of stating his own personal biases, which could influence his framing of events. In recognition of this, he actually does distance himself from reflecting his own opinions in his content. So the Caspian Report maintains a self-sustained channel through public contributions, although without knowing the origin of these payments, it could be difficult to identify conflicts of interest. For the New York Times, in the age of fake news, traditional print media can have perceptions of history and tradition which lends credibility to the promoted stories. While not necessarily true, the perception would be enough to sway an audience prepared to take the established journal's words at face value. For BBC Ukrainian, short and to the point, gives the impression it's merely a relay of information without any analysis. BBC does have a well-established reputation for providing reputable, quality, mainstream journalism. However, being BBC Ukrainian, it would probably not enjoy the same levels of consumer satisfaction as BBC Global enjoys. So what are the broader political contexts of these frames enforcing? Well, for Caspian Report, traditional geopolitics. The notion that states are rational and acting out of self-interest. Here, Ukraine is the center of the geopolitical struggle between Russia and the West, reinforcing that paradigm of balance of power and perpetuating Cold War perspectives. So he does assert that while yes, Russia is currently unlawfully occupying Crimea, it is doing so out of geographic necessity to ensure the region which it has historically considered to be within its sphere of influence, and it's also as a reaction to the expansion of NATO into Eastern Europe. So for the New York Times, again, aligning with, in many ways, with the traditional balance of power frame. For example, he cites Sergei Tatua, former governor in Donetsk, stating this attack signaled the Kremlin's determination not only to cement its hold on Crimea, but also to parade its defiance of the West. Without a resolution of this geopolitical struggle, Russia will show its strength wherever possible. So again, BBC Ukrainian, confirming that Russian aggression stance towards the West, and also that inherently expansionist tendency informed by, potentially the lingering Soviet ambitions for world domination. So, what are the applicable instruments of international law, and what implications does this have for our story today? Well, the first most primary 2003 treaty between the Russian Federation and Ukraine on cooperation in the use of the Sea of Azov and Kerch Strait. So, this was discussed as underlying the potential illegality of Russia's actions in both the Caspian Report clip as well as the New York Times article, but not the BBC Ukrainian piece. Shivan from Caspian Report notes that Russia argues the annexation of Crimea in 2014 invalidates the agreement, and that the area and waters surrounding the Kerch Strait are effectively Russian. So obviously, this would be against the concept of sovereignty discussed later. UN Plus was discussed in principle only in both the Caspian Report clip and the New York Times article, but again, not in the BBC News piece. In the New York Times piece, Andrew firmly places the issue within the available framework of IL, citing the 2003 treaty and the fact that according to analysis of Russian-provided maritime coordinates, the incident actually took place in international waters. So a discussion of Article 39 and principle of freedom of navigation would lend a broader analysis of the situation. So the UN Charter was referred to in discussions of the notion of annexation in all three sources, but only as unlawful in the first two. The Caspian Report was the only source to delve deeper, discussing sovereignty with regards to the EU non-recognition policy, along with ongoing case against Moscow and a bipartisan request for emergency meeting of the UNSC, so referencing procedures for the peaceful settlement of international disputes. So in conclusion, I posit that the findings of the media framing analysis of these three sources is consistent with the dominant narrative that would be expected in their respective audiences and societies of origin. The NY Times and BBC Ukrainian perpetuate established frames of Russia as an aggressive expansionist state, and were less inclined with the legal foundations of the claim, choosing to focus on political aspects of the story in line with their broader audience interests. The Caspian Report takes a more measured approach, with issues of international law being well thought out and an informative nature. Thank you.